They hired me to sing some of these songs. They were instructional videos, and I got paid. That was like my very first recording experience. I think I was in fifth grade, and I got paid $100, which, in those years in the 60s was like a huge amount. Like my parents' rent for the house, the 2-bedroom house that we lived in East LA, was $60 a month. And I made $100 just by singing. I was like, oh, wow, I'm rich. I'm going to be rich when I grow up.
Rob Ruckus,
Nick Collins,
Kate Clover,
Keith Semple,
Isaiah Mitchell,
Billy Harvey,
Tim Howard. Check it out, Almost Famous Magazine.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Hang right here on Almost Famous Magazine. I'm your host, Scott Saldinger. Thank you for hanging with us and getting to know musicians, learning about their stories, and getting to know them just, well beyond just their music. If you are new to the channel, please, you know what to do. Subscribe, hit the button, share this with your friends. It goes a long way to helping not only the podcast, but also the artists who appear. If you've been here before and you're coming back for more, have you shared it with your friends? If not, what are you waiting for? You came back for more. Also, if you prefer not to see this lovely face on your podcasts, I can totally understand. It's a face a mother loves, but we are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and more. As part of our Dollfest coverage, I am super excited to have a woman who is a legend in the punk world here on The Hang. From, East Los Angeles to the heart of Hollywood's punk explosion. Today's guest is a true iconoclast whose snarling vocals and fearless presence helped define the first wave of LA punk as the co-founder and lead singer of The Bags. She makes waves. She didn't just make noise. She made history, carving out a space for women, queer voices, and Chicana identity in a scene that thrived on disruption. And she is still disrupting the world today. On The Hang, we're honored to welcome the incomparable Alice Bagg. She's a punk legend, author, activist, and living proof that rebellion can be both loud and lasting. Alice, I'm so happy to have you here today.
Thank you so much. What a beautiful introduction. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me. Now, as we know, you're going to be performing in Mexico City for Dollfest, and we're going to get to that.
Okay.
But I think it's super important for everyone watching to get acquainted with you and kind of learn your musical story. So we tend to start these conversations with, how your relationship with music began. Did you find music, or did music find you? And how did that become the fuel of your life?
I feel like I was born with music, like everything. Since I was a little kid, music was really important to me. My father really doted on me and encouraged me to sing and perform for the family. And I was maybe 5 years old when I was in a program at Costello Park in, I think it's in Boyle Heights. But I got a solo, and it was like my parents' proudest moment. I sang Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. So that was my first solo. And then in elementary school, my music teacher singled me out and bestowed a rare honor on me. She hooked me up with a company that was making bilingual cartoons, and they hired me to sing some of these songs. They were instructional videos, and I got paid. That was like my very first recording experience. I think I was in fifth grade, and I got paid $100, which, in those years in the 60s was like a huge amount. Like my parents' rent for the house, the 2-bedroom house that we lived in East LA, was $60 a month. And I made $100 just by singing. I was like, oh, wow, I'm rich. I'm going to be rich when I grow up. But I also kind of tucked that away because, as I continued to grow up, I realized that most or a lot of parents discourage kids from actually thinking of the arts as a viable career choice. So,
yeah. Well, my first question is, when you sang Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, was it with your punk attitude?
Well, you know what? It wasn't my very limited understanding of English, because I only I only spoke Spanish for the first like 5 years of my life, and I learned a little bit of English. And at the time, there was this toothpaste called Gleam, and I wasn't familiar with the word glee, so I thought that the reindeer were like holding up their Gleam toothpaste. So I said they shouted out with Gleam. Um, so yeah, and that, that is kind of the story of my life, like figuring out how to pronounce words and what words mean in English. That was a recurring story. I remember in junior high, like being in science class, and the teacher asking like how to cure something, and I was like, being smart, raised my hand and I said penicillin, penicillin, because in Spanish it's penicilina. And of course the whole room burst out laughing, and my teacher had to had to point it out as well, like, oh, you mean penicillin. I'm like, okay, sorry, enough about my humiliation for now.
Please, I'll probably humiliate myself 6 or 7 times before we finish this conversation. Don't worry about it. I am really good at it. It's on my resume. So you started out young and you got paid to do this voice work, and that kind of sparked you. At that point in your life, what music was starting to influence you to create that energy of, wait a minute, I've gotten paid. I think this is something I want to try and pursue at some point. And how did that start to build? Were you drawn to any certain types of music? And when did you start to realize that making your own music could be something for you?
Well, there's a lot of questions in there. So I'll start with, first of all, as I said, my father was my biggest fan. And so I would make up songs about like my dog, or, my favorite Barbie or something. And, which of course wasn't a real Barbie, but an imitation that we got at the thrift store. But, I'd make up these songs, and my father would take me downtown, and there were these little booths that were kind of like photo booths where you could pay, get a recording, and then you would get a record. I think they would just mail it to your house afterwards. And so I remember a few years ago, well, quite a few years ago, probably like 20 years ago, finding one of those little 45s with my father talking to me saying, okay, sing the song. And I'm like, in this little kid voice singing a made up song. But I think I got so much love for that. And like my father thought I was just a genius and super creative. And I feel like that was a real gift to me that has lasted my entire life. I've always felt like, oh yeah, I can do anything. But about my musical influences were completely dictated by my family. My mother listened to Mexican pop. My sister listened to soul music, and my father listened to rancheras. So those were the 3 main influences of my youth. And it wasn't until I was maybe in junior high school that I started listening to rock music. That's when, and I think a big reason that I got into rock music was because, at least where I was going to school, rock music was not really popular. It was the stuff that the weirdos were listening to. And I could relate to that. I remember in junior high school, you're going through that, like, you're going through these hormonal shifts and you're starting to discover sexuality. And I remember having feelings for boys and girls and not understanding them, and maybe thinking there was something wrong with me. And a friend introduced me to the music of David Bowie, and I liked it. But then I read an interview with David Bowie where he talked about being bisexual, and something just clicked for me. And I'm like, that's what I am. And he is like, he's a great artist. I really admire him. If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. So I started identifying as bisexual in junior high school. And that was freedom for me. That was like a revelation. And so I think I just became very, I still loved the music of my family, and I still listened to it, but I felt like rock music gave me a certain freedom.
Oh, that's great. And yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if you've seen the memes online, especially with the 10th anniversary of David Bowie's passing, but how the world was great up until that point, and then suddenly it went to shit after his death. And I think there's something to it because he was truly an amazing pioneer of music. So you start to get into Bowie and you start to find yourself. How did that get you to punk? How did that get to you to, I've got these voices inside of this voice inside of me and these thoughts and ideas. And here comes this, this other thing that at the time was really underground and new.
Well, I think, first of all, I feel like a lot of people came from glam, which David Bowie was, in the midst of glam. And I feel like a lot of people who are into glam transitioned to punk. But my specific journey started when I was a kid. And it was really, I was a weirdo, like from a very early age. I was one of those kids that was just awkward. And I was bullied in school, and I didn't have a lot of friends. So I kind of felt like an outcast. And that's like, that's kind of the perfect, I felt like punk was the perfect outlet for somebody who feels like an outcast. I also grew up in an abusive household. My father was abusive to my mother. And even though the abuse wasn't directed at me, I really felt like I was in the middle of a war zone, and I felt like I had like PTSD or something, like I felt traumatized by all the violence that I'd witnessed. And violence, not just random violence among strangers, but violence between my loved ones. So it was really, really intense pain. That was pain and a feeling of like frustration at not being able to do anything about it. So when punk came along, there were a couple things that led me there. First is that feeling of being an outcast, right? And which was, it's like an invitation to punk. Then being a woman and being disenfranchised, entering a scene where like you don't have to be Brian May to be in a punk band. You don't have to play the way that glam demanded that you play. Glam was great, but it was for people who were like really talented musicians. I felt like a lot of the glam music was like, it could have been made by well, I won't say session musicians, although I think session musicians are very talented. But I feel like a lot of what I was listening to before that required a big budget. And it felt like punk was accessible to the weirdo, to women who didn't have like maybe the experience of playing live that other musicians did, and who had been like kept out of it because of that, because there wasn't like a successful track record that a record executive could point to and say like, oh, those women made millions of dollars for us. Although there were women who were super talented, and I'm thinking of Fanny, who were like great musicians, and they put out a fantastic record, but then they never got the support from the record company, right? So I wish Fanny had been around like right at the beginning of punk, but we got the Go-Go's, right? So we got the Go-Go's who came in. They were super talented. They came in and they actually changed the face and the trajectory of punk too, and they broadened what people thought of as punk music. So anyway, I got way off base. Forgive me, Scott. I just tend to babble and
Keep going.
go where my
That's
mind.
what we're doing today. This is what we're doing. This is what we do here. This is just a friendly conversation. So keep going. I love this.
Yeah. So I feel like women felt like we don't have to play, we can play as badly as the guy bands, right? And some of them, and not all, and of course, not all women were beginners. There were a lot who were very good musicians, but a lot of us were beginners, and we were a little bit. And I feel like every woman that started a punk band, when they first started, they would say, "Well, I'm just a beginner. I'm just learning." Like we had learned to be like modest and demure, and any guy that had just picked up a guitar for the first time would come up and say like, oh, listen to this, like kind of like a blend of self-confidence and bravado. And I think at a certain point, like being in a punk band taught women that they didn't have to like dim their light or like be so humble, that they were getting up and doing it. And it did take courage to do that. And we had different things to talk about. We had different songs to sing, different experiences. There were a lot of people of color and by that I mean mostly brown and Asian in California. But who came with different, like I said, I came from a background of listening to ranchera and Mexican pop and soul. So it wasn't like I didn't grow up listening to rock and roll or music that is traditionally considered white, although I don't feel like music really has, I don't feel that it's limited by ethnicity. I feel like we all listen to whatever we enjoy and speaks to our hearts. So I feel like we brought those influences with us. Like I feel like a lot of times my singing style has been compared to ranchera style, like kind of singing loud and bold and not so much pretty. I have a voice for truth, not a voice for pretty.
You know what? We need truth in the world. We need a lot of truth in the world. So I can understand, and you know what? We're all better off for the truth.
Thank you.
And I was you kind of led me down a little bit of a path that I was going to go to. When you started out, when you were on the early punk scene, I mean, it started out and is kind of to a certain extent remained a rather, let's say, pale testosterone filled genre for a while. What are your overall thoughts and feelings on really this rise of women in punk? Because I find that there seems to be a lot more punk music being made by women these days than ever before, and I love the vibrance that they're bringing to it.
Yeah, I feel I suppose that there are periods where like opportunities for women were less. But I feel that women, like once that opportunity became available to women to be in punk bands, it was like you could not. I don't know what that saying is. You can't put it back in the box. What is that saying? You can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? Like now that we know, like, hey, we can get up there. We have role models. We've seen it done. And you just get up there and do it. I personally, I've always tried to go to shows that have a mix of people, whether it's like, queer or people of color or women centered shows. I try to support that and I try to make sure that the bills I'm on reflect that because that's what I want to see. That's what interests me. Also, like, yeah, I mean, yes, I will watch the occasional all boy band and enjoy it too. I don't have anything against that. Just make some room for the rest of us. That's all, And if you are in a position of privilege where you get to choose who's on your bill, then please be inclusive. And if I don't see that, I really have no interest in going to your show.
Yeah, and I think that lends itself to something that I look for in shows these days is what's different or unique about what's being done. What statement are they making? So that it's not what I've already experienced before, but it's something new that'll energize me with new thoughts and ideas.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail right on the head. And I feel like that's what gave punk its longevity is the fact that it wasn't just, okay, we're just going to keep doing it the same way and just rearrange the chords or rearrange the instrumentation.
Yeah. No, it blows my mind that it's kind of like what goes around comes around, or the idea that, the more things change, the more they kind of stay the same. Right. But we've reached a point now where, heck, just what is it, a couple of days ago, they announced that, even Green Day is going to be the opening act for the Super Bowl, right? I mean, punk.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
Yeah. It just seems that it continues to grow and thrive and evolve, right? But it retains its core essence that was founded on, right? So it changes with the times and evolves so that more people can come into it. And I love that about punk. I really do. Because it does give you that room for those of us who do feel like an outcast, like we don't necessarily fit in, but when we're in that community, we're at home.
So wait, can I go back for a second?
Sure.
Just because I don't really follow sports, so I don't really know. Is what you were talking about, the Super Bowl, is that going to be like Bad Bunny and Green Day?
Yes.
Oh my God, I'm going to have to watch the Super Bowl.
Oh yeah, no,
that's going to be interesting. And I mean, somebody's going to get mad about that, and I want to see it.
I think they already are. I believe there's some sort of an alternative to it that's not the Puppy Bowl. So we'll see what happens over on that end of the TV spectrum on Super Bowl day. You've been in the punk scene long enough. I'm curious, are there things that you saw early on in punk that have come back around full circle, but with a different spin to them that catches your attention, right? Different attitudes, different thoughts or ideas, because it's all about that evolution.
Yeah, I feel like when punk first started, it was really, really diverse. And then around the time that I decided I'm going to go back to school, one of the reasons that I wanted to get out of the punk scene was because I started seeing it become very homogenous. And, it was a time when all of a sudden punk had exploded and you could find clothes at the local mall, and big record companies started signing punk bands, and it became a commodity. And it felt like what was being produced was not as edgy or interesting to me. And even what people were wearing was less creative, where we had once gone thrift store shopping and torn up our clothes and then repaired them and maybe glued some toy soldiers on them, or, some other kind of toy, whatever. We did what we could with what was at hand. And as a result, our presentation was unique and bordered on clownish sometimes, but that's okay. And then at a certain point, it was like, oh yeah, okay, that person is dressed punk. Oh, that sound is the punk sound. And I feel like it's come around to where, once again, people are starting to be more creative. There's a lot more emphasis on, the emphasis has returned to DIY, putting out your own music, putting out doing something that's not formulaic, and making your own outfits and making your own artwork, and not necessarily relying on the big clubs, but doing underground shows. So I love that I'm seeing that, because that just means more accessibility for everybody, which means more diversity and more creativity, because you're hearing different things from different backgrounds.
Yeah, it seems that punk kind of knew the future of music before it, literally 30, 40 years before it really ever arrived to what it is today, where a lot of what artists have to do today, right? Whether they're in punk or not, it is a bit more DIY, and they have to be more participatory in their creativity, because there's that fight for attention in the 24/7, 365 world of content. So yeah. Punk was prepared well before anyone else, I think. In your years of writing, and I'm asking this question, I guess I'll preface this. An album's coming out shortly by the band Squeeze. And this album was written 50 years ago and was supposed to be their very first album. And the record company shelved it for what became the first Squeeze album. and they're revisiting it with the new incarnation of Squeeze and new sound and whatnot. And they have found things in what they wrote about back then that have reinvigorated them. Any of your writing from your earlier days that you kind of set aside for a while, and maybe it resonated with you and then kind of walked off for a little while and came back? Is there anything that you've done earlier on in your career that you feel is something that's, super relevant today? That's still a resonating message.
No, I feel like I've kind of had the opposite experience where like we're going to be playing some shows. We're playing Dollfest and we're playing a show at the Sardine next month, and I decided I wanted to do some bag songs. And as I was listening to the lyrics, I thought, like, at a certain point, I say something about we're wild and teenage. And I'm like, oh my God, I feel so awkward singing that line. I'm 67 years old. Maybe I should find another word, like put it another way. Then I thought, I'm just going to keep it the way it was written, although it feels awkward for me to sing. And I probably won't be singing it for very long. But I write a lot, so and I'm constantly looking for inspiration in the news and like things that frustrate me, like everyday interactions. So I don't usually go back very far to work on a song. I feel like, if I write 100 songs, maybe 10 of them are worth keeping. I mean, not to say that I'm a bad writer, but I do like to cycle through stuff. And then, I feel like the cream will rise to the top. You'll see which songs are better. And then someone's going to listen to my record and they're going to say, like, those were the best 10, but hopefully not.
Well, in that vein, I was going to get this in a little bit, but I'm, people are going to, see this and they may not be familiar with your catalog. And every artist puts out, used to be, you did a record, you put out some singles. Now I see it as much more of a world of an encompassing catalog because the distribution is so different. There are artists putting out a new song every month, or someone just does an EP, et cetera. If getting to know a musician's catalog was kind of like a meal, what one, two, or three could be, songs that you feel in your catalog best represent the essence of you as a performer, as a writer, as the persona that you want out there for people to latch onto, that they're going to say, wait a minute, I listened to these three. Now I got to go buy the entire catalog because I'm hooked.
Oh, boy, that's really tough. Yeah, I do like often write about my own life, so I feel like a lot of it is autobiographical, and but it's hard to pick one or two things that really represent me. I have a song on my my last record, Sister Dynamite, called Spark, and it's just about not dimming what makes you you. So even if you're a weirdo, if you're perceived as such, if you dress strangely or you behave strangely, to embrace that and not try and, I spent years and years trying to fit in my early teens and then through high school and maybe even a little bit in college. But eventually I just embraced my weirdness, and I've been happy ever since. As soon as I just realized I'm never going to be the normal person. I'm always going to be awkward when I walk into a room. If I don't know people, I'm going to, I shut down a little bit. But that's okay. So I'd say Spark is one. I'd say Babylonian Gorgon I didn't write it. It was written for me by my guitarist, Craig Lee. And I feel like it's kind of my theme song because when I first started singing it, I remember getting on stage for the first time and I needed glasses at the time. Then I had LASIK, and now I need glasses again. But at the time, I needed glasses, and I took off my glasses. I got on stage. I went into my rant, and I kind of like lost myself in the music and in this like musical therapy that punk rock, the service that punk rock did for me was that it kind of provided therapy for me. And the reviews afterwards were somebody said that I looked like a Babylonian Gorgon that could like freeze somebody in their tracks, right? And my guitarist wrote a song about that, and I realized that part of like and people would say they were scared of me because I looked scary on stage, or I'd be in the audience not wearing my glasses because I was too vain, so I maybe be squinting, and it would look like I was giving them a dirty look, but it wasn't that.
It's a great story. It's a great story. You mentioned your band. You're doing some shows, Dollfest, of course. And I love learning about people that are chosen to be in a band, and the choices that an artist makes to bring them on board. And I will be a little selfish here. I know one person in your band, and he's been on this podcast a few times, and I adore him. And that daughter of his is amazing. So you know who I'm talking about.
Yes. Sharif.
The king, the king of mid-fi, as we call him around here. That's his moniker. And I'm sure as soon as this airs, I'm going to get a phone call. But the musicians that you have with you on stage now, tell me a little bit about each of them and what they bring to your sound and how you want your music portrayed.
Well, I think when I first decided I was going to record a record before I even had a band. I decided I was going to record a record, and that came from an experience I had with the band Thea from San Antonio. They wrote to me and they said they wanted to record an album and they wanted me to produce it. And of course, I had never produced an album by myself. I had, I'd been in bands, and in a band, like everybody like gives their opinion when the song is being recorded and mixed, and all along the way, you have everybody pulling in different directions. But the fact that they entrusted me with that responsibility made me go out and look at studios and find something that I thought like, oh, this is a really good studio. And this engineer, Mark Rains, fantastic engineer, producer, like he's just a very talented person. I found him for Fair. And as I was working with Fair, I thought like, why don't I make my own record? I have songs that I've never recorded. I'd love to do something. And I decided to get a Kickstarter going. And at that time, I figured I'm just going to, probably just have one record. So I'm going to ask all my musician friends to play on it. So I thought of like who my favorite musicians were. Not all of them, because there are other favorite musicians that I, didn't have the opportunity to use that first recording. But I mean, I'd had like, decades of playing music in Los Angeles. So I knew a lot of people. So I tried to match up certain drum styles with certain songs, certain bass parts, for certain musicians, and certain guitar sounds. So at the first record is a mix. I think there are like 3 different crews. There's and I don't even know if Candace Hansen, who is my steady drummer now, if she played on it. I know Ricky Watson played on some of the songs, and Joe Berardi played on some of the songs. And I think I mixed. I hope I'm not leaving anybody out, but I did it that way. I played with a lot of different people, and then eventually I started playing live, and it just kind of started to gel that certain groups, certain people were on tour. Like I recorded with Eva Gardner, who is a fantastic bassist, but she tours with Pink and she tours with Cher and she tours with like, you know, uh, a lot of bands. She tours with a lot of bands. She's in demand. And I also, I could go through a list of musicians. Anyway, these musicians just happened to kind of gel into like, they started playing together. They felt right together. They wanted to play and they had availability. So we started kind of bonding. And so they became my regular band. And, and, that's how that worked out.
So I have to ask because he's not told me, but how did you and Sharif Dumani come into
How did we
each
meet?
other's orbits? Yeah.
Well, because I actually was a huge fan of Sex Stains, which is the band that he had with Allison Wolf. And Allison Wolf and I were friends before I met Sharif. So I would, go to support Allison and I'd see the band and I'm like, oh, wow, this band is great. Everyone was super, super talented. And I asked her, I was like, do you mind if I use Sharif on a couple songs, 2 or 3 songs on my record? And she said no. And I asked Sharif and he's like, I would love to, so it was all very friendly. And then I just kept Sharif. But also, they went, Sex Stains broke up and they went in a different direction and it's all good now, but it was a little weird for a few minutes there where, because, my very good friend Allison and my guitarist Sharif were no longer playing together. Awkward for a minute, but then it was over.
In the life of Sharif, it had to be a very brief minute because he's involved in so many projects.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. That's a great story. A few years ago, you decided to move to Mexico for a little while. How did that move kind of, enhance your life and your perspective?
Well, we moved as soon as the COVID vaccinations became available. Like we were at home for a year and a half or something, and then and we watched a lot of YouTube videos about living in Mexico. And one of the things that happened during that time was that my cousin passed away from COVID, and my aunt, who was 97 years old, called me on the phone and said, Alicia, if you are going to come out and spend time with me, which you've been saying your whole life and you've never done, you should do it now because I'm 97 years old and this, there's this thing going around that could kill me. So we got our vaccines. I told my husband, I have to go see my aunt, and he quit his job. We sold, like, I would say about 90% of our belongings. We fortunately had some room in the basement to put a few of our things away. We rented our house here in Los Angeles and moved to Mexico City. And the best thing about that move was spending the next couple of years with my aunt. My aunt did eventually catch COVID and she died of it at 99 years old, just as we were planning her 100th birthday party. And, but I am so grateful that I got to spend that time with her. Also, just being in Mexico City was a fantastic experience. It's, the people are just so they're in it every day. They're not like, I feel like we have a completely different mentality here in the United States. A lot of time I feel like we're kind of on a hamster wheel, like trying to like, oh, I'm going to make it through the day and then live for the weekend and the evenings and weekends, right? And the rest of the days are just like, let me make it through this. Well, I feel like the mentality there is like people like every day take a long lunch break in the middle of the day to spend with people that they care about. And they have this thing called sobremesa, which is like considered rude if you don't participate. So instead of going in and having lunch and leaving, you're expected to linger and talk about your day or talk about whatever's on your mind and just live. And it's such a nice thing that every day feels like a holiday, or it did for us, when my husband and I were there. And it also, we were trying on retirement. We would, like, one of our regular things was we were living in this area called Coyoacan, which is a beautiful part of Mexico City. Even though all of Mexico City is just gorgeous, it has different things. This part of town has a very, like, old colonial vibe. And it's the place where Frida Kahlo grew up. So there's Casa de Frida, and there's a little mercado downtown where you can get your fresh fruits and vegetables every day. You don't, and but as well as, like, great supermarkets that are really well stocked. Everything I could possibly want was there. And we'd walk to the park every day and get the ice cream in flavors like cempasúchil, which is like the marigold flowers that are used for Day of the Dead, or like fruits that I had never heard of. And I just tried maracuya. And, it's like, oh, I don't know what this is, but it's delicious. So I'm sorry, I don't even know what you asked me. I'm just talking about Mexico now. And
you have just answered the why I need to expat there
yeah.
question, because I went to San Miguel for a long weekend and fell in love with it, and it's everything that you said and more, and it's everything that I think that we just don't stop and enjoy here in the States.
Yeah.
It literally, you were talking about the hamster wheel. I had that conversation yesterday with someone.
Yeah.
So, we just don't give life enough life, I think.
Yeah.
And
I think we're trained that way. I mean, I think those are, like, estadounidense values. Those are our values here. Like, get things done, produce, and then take a break for a little while.
And then get
But
back
I
on
think
the hamster wheel.
Exactly. I'm sorry, I am having really bad allergies, so I just cut this out.
It's okay. So, me too. I'm heading to the doctor a little later. So now I'm curious though, because at 67, you're phenomenally creative and vibrant in that creativity. Did living there impact your creativity? Did it give you new ideas, things to write about, and really help energize you?
Yeah, definitely. I first of all, the first baby step I took was that I started just changing some of my lyrics on my last album into Spanish. So I translated a couple of the songs into Spanish, which is a very easy thing for me to do by myself in another country, right? Because I have the tracks already. So I had friends who were musicians in Mexico City. So I asked them to come in and sing backup with me on a couple of the songs, and that was a very, very quick and easy, rewarding thing. So if you have, like, wherever you do your streaming, you can listen to, like, Migajitas or Aviéntate Ya. Those were two of the. and and then I actually formed a band with a couple of young girls that were. They were just friends who were hanging out with me all the time. And I'm like, oh, let's form a band together. One of them, her name is Sarah Norman, is the, how do you say, her great aunt was Lucia Norman, who was, she was an anarchist who was living here in Los Angeles, and she was working with oh my God, I can't think of his name. Flores Magon. Anyway, she had, like, a really interesting anarchist background. And there's a story about her. Flores Magon is imprisoned here in Los Angeles, and Lucia Norman goes out to protest his being jailed. And at the time, they had, like, women wore hats with hat pins, and they get attacked And they take out their hat pins and start poking the police fighting back the police with these long hat pins. And of course she's arrested too, but but anyway, I was so fascinated by this story of just bumping into Lucia Norman's great granddaughter or great grandniece, that we decided to call our band, our all-female band that we were forming, Lucia y los Alfileres, which is Lucia and the hat pins, and the pins really. But that band was with Sarah Norman, Violeta de Caballo, Violeta Hinojosa, who is also in a great band called Soga and Tórax y las Extremidades. And oh my God, I can't think of everybody's name right now. We started off with a friend of ours named Gogo, and then we bumped into Belinda Carlisle, and she wrote to me. We had been friends during the early punk scene, and I hadn't seen her in years. And she wrote to me and she said, "Hey, I'm moving to Mexico City. Let's hang out." And I said, "Hey, I have this band. Do you want to sing a couple songs with us?" And of course, the band at the time was like very, very beginning stages. But we got on a show, and Belinda sang with us. We wore these, in honor of Belinda, we all wore black trash bags. And it was just crazy because it was a dilapidated old, like, casona, which is like, it's kind of like almost like a mansion, but it was like in disrepair. And so we sang in a room that was like about the size of my living room. And that was the band and the audience were there. And the dressing room was this little abandoned bedroom full of junk. And I just thought, oh, Belinda must be like, this is so painful for her because she is a star. She's used to being treated like a star. But she was so cool. She came up to me afterwards and she said, I haven't had that much fun in a long time. It was great. And I was like, thank you for being such a good sport. So, yeah, that was really, really fun.
I was going to say, I make you a bet. She had an absolute blast and loved it for sure. I've heard some great.
Well, I don't think she'd been that close to her fans. Like, I mean, her fans were literally like probably no more than a foot away from her, and you don't get that in the kind of shows that she does, right? And everybody was like so excited. You can feel that energy when people are that close to you. And I feel like maybe you don't feel it as much, but of course, I haven't had the privilege of playing, these places that are really big, but even when we've opened for people that are, big stars in bigger venues, there's always the security pit, right? That, there's a lot of space between you and the front row. So you get the applause and everything, but you don't feel the vibrations of the person that's right in front of you in the same way, I think. Sorry, I know I'm getting you a little woo-woo.
I'll tell you, as a guy who stands in that pit and takes photos, I know exactly what you're talking about, because there's a palatable energy that you feel off those people on the rail. I mean, it's a real thing, and absolutely. Between a club show and a large show, I always prefer smaller venues where you can truly get that vibration. It's kind of like crystals, right? Some people think they get a vibration off crystals or not. You can actually feel the frequency, and I love that. So I totally know where you're coming from. Speaking of performing, we need to talk about Dollfest. How did your participation come about? Because I love this for the bands in the audience. This is like, people have asked me about it, and I've explained it as like, it's punk Lilith Fair, right? In a sense. How did you get involved, and what does it mean for you to be part of it?
Well, I was approached by Tati, who is, she runs a club there called Gato Calavera. She's also had She had another venue called No Somos Nada. And she has a band called Bloody Benders. She does everything. She's a mover and shaker in Mexico City, very well respected, like just also really just a very nice person and easy to deal with and to, like if you are conducting business with her, she's very honest and I feel like really good about working with her, but she's also like she's a bigwig and doesn't act like one, I don't know if that makes any sense, but I really like working with people who don't try and like, whole act too important. She acts like, hey, I'm in the same boat as you. Like, so I love working with her. I worked with her before actually because I played Gato Calavera in 2019, right before the pandemic hit, and that was a real treat. This is a different venue now; it's a much bigger venue, but Tati and I have stayed in contact, and she actually wrote to me through WhatsApp and said, "Hey, are you interested in playing this?" And I'm like, "Yeah, but I'm in LA now." And they're like, "We'll make it happen." And so we are going out there. I'm so excited. There's like so many great bands on that bill. I am excited to play. And there's also the show. Our show is on the 7th, but there is a pre-party show on the 6th also, and Trap Girl is going out, which is another of my favorite bands. So they're going to be playing too. And I think it's just going to be like, if you feel like getting away for a few days and flying to Mexico City and having fun, seeing some great bands, I highly recommend it. I think it's just going to be a big party.
No, I wish I could make that one. I may make Oakland. I'm working on it. But let me tell you something. You're absolutely right. Tati is fantastic. I sat with her like this and we talked for about an hour, and she's got so much going on. But none of it involves her ego. And she's so authentic, and it's refreshing, right? So it's really enjoyable to talk to her. And I hope all the best for her and her band too, because I know it's important to them. So absolutely, she's fantastic. Other festivals,
if you go, don't miss Bloody Benders for sure.
or Alice Bag. I mean, she's going to be
Alice Bag or Descartes Kant, and there's so many bands.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because there's one festival that we're pretty connected to, and we're a little disappointed that this year there's not going to be one. But if my memory serves me correctly, you have you played punk rock bowling before? You hadn't you?
I did play, yes.
What was that like for you? When was that?
Oh, well, you asked me that. You said you were going to ask me any gotcha question. No, I had a bad experience. I actually had a bad experience. I'm going to be really honest with you. I played a club show, and we were supposed to play with the Damned, and there was a problem, and the Damned, I guess Dave Vaining got sick and couldn't make it at the last minute, and they had to pull in another band that had played earlier that day to come and do a second set at the club show. And they made us leave the stage after like 4 songs so the other band could play, which was extremely disappointing, not only for us, but for people who actually wanted to see us, not just, the band that had played earlier on the big stage. So if I sound a little bitter, I am. There were some apologies extended, and I am, I do accept the apology, and I'm happy to move forward. But I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. It was a bad experience, and I still feel like my people who had gone to see us didn't get their money's worth.
Yeah, no, I can completely understand. Well, maybe there's not going to be punk rock bowling this year, but maybe they find it a way to make an apology and give you a main stage opportunity to really show off your your music someday, and it's something to consider maybe. But it's sometimes things happen. I mean, it's sad and unfortunate you had a bad experience.
Yeah, well, I'm 67 years old. I'm not going to be doing Alice Bag, that much longer. I think I'm guessing it's going to, I'm going to be wrapping it up very soon. At least this type of music. I have a band that I do with Kid Congo Powers that is a lounge act, and it's for my age, it's much more manageable. I feel like, and I don't want to say that there are plenty of people who are older than me and can get up and rock the night away. I'm physically not where I was when I was younger. And I'd rather go out on a high note than drag my old carcass up there and
Well,
and put on a performance that doesn't meet my expectations. I want to be good. I want to energize the audience. I want to sing my songs with passion and fury, and I feel like as I get older, there are things breaking down in my body. I've got osteoporosis. I've got like different things that are just starting to, I'm a Model T and parts are starting to fly off. Um, that came together in a really funny way. Kid and I are both on In the Red, and Larry Hardy, who runs In the Red, sent us both an email, and he said, "Hey, there's this network called Peacock that is putting out a show called The Resort, and they want you guys to write a song for it. One of you, either Alice or Kid." And I think they said Kid or Alice, and I said, well, if Kid wants it, he should have it because his name is first. And he said, no, no, no. If Alice wants to do it, she can do it. And I knew that it was going to be like decent network money, so I was like, I knew we both wanted it. So I said, why don't we both do it? And Kid was, yeah, let's both do it. We wrote back to the network and they went for it. They said, yeah, do it. And we want you both to come on the show and perform it. So at that time, I was still living in Mexico City, and I went into La Bestia, which is a recording studio rehearsal place that am, I know well. I actually had a radio show there for a little bit. Anyway, I went into La Bestia and I recorded a demo for Kid, and then he went into Waterworks in Tucson and he recorded some guitar parts and some vocals and sent it back. And that's how we wrote our song, just like back and forth. And we sent it off, and then they flew us out to Puerto Rico so that we could pretend to be on a Mexican beach, even though I was already in Mexico. But yeah, long way to the beach. So it was such fun working with Kid. It was so easy working with him. Like, he's just like such a positive person, and so chilled and laid back and just like easygoing. I loved the experience. Unfortunately, I caught COVID the last day, right as we were like packing our things, getting ready to go out. The studios would do our COVID tests all the time because they didn't want anybody on the set that tested positive. Well, I tested positive on the last day. So I had to spend an extra 10 days in a hotel in Puerto Rico, looking out my balcony at the waves crashing. It was, there were a lot of things. It was rough. And luckily NBC picked up the tab. So thank you for that. And then after that, like, the Broad contacted us. The Broad is a very nice, prestigious museum here in Los Angeles. And they said, we would like you guys to perform at a thing that it was the show, I think, was like 6 months away. And at the time, Kid and I had only written the one song, right? So I wrote to Kid and I'm like, hey, the Broad is asking us if we want to do this show. They want an hour set. And he's like, Ask them if they'll go for a half hour set. And I think we settled on 45 minutes. And I, because at the time, Greg and I, my husband and I, had not renewed our rent, in a regular fashion. We were kind of Airbnb from place to place, and we Airbnb'd in Tucson for a month. And Kid and I worked together, and we wrote this, like an album's worth of material for the show at the Broad. And then we just decided we're just going to record it and see if Larry Hardy will put it out, and he did, and that is our origin story. The rest is history.
I love that. Well, hopefully the rest isn't just history. I hope there's going to be more. Will there?
I'm going out at the end of the month to record another record with Kid. So we'll be.
Then you and Kid are coming back. Then you and Kid are coming back, and we're going to do this again because I would love to have both of you tell everyone about that.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we're playing Arroyo Psychedelic this summer, so hopefully that will be.
That's great. I love that. That's a fabulous story. As we kind of get to, kind of toward the end of our discussion, because if we put everything out on the table today, we'll have nothing to talk about the next time. You've had an amazing career and you've played with so many people, but is there one artist that you've always maybe had in the back of your mind? Some people consider it a bucket list, or they have a vision board, or, their dream opportunity. Is there someone that you've not worked with that if you had a chance to get in the studio with them to create for a day, who would it be and why?
I don't have someone like that. I feel like I meet new musicians all the time, and I usually hit them up if I want to work with them. There are like artists that I think like, oh, they're too popular for me to ask. But yes, of course, I would love to do, I'd love to sing a duet with Shirley Manson or something, but but I realize, she's way too famous. She's got other things to do.
Okay, wait a minute. Anyone who's watching, who's been hanging with us this long, if you know Shirley, if you're connected to her, maybe you're her dog sitter, I don't know, maybe you've once bumped into her in a coffee shop, you tell her she needs to get in the studio with Alice. And let's see what we can make happen for Alice. Because let's circle back to one thing. You said your aunt lived to be 99, and if it wasn't for COVID, so Alice, I don't think you're going anywhere fast. I think we're going to have you around for a while, and there's going to be a lot more.
Thank you.
So let's see if we can get Shirley's attention.
Oh God, no! I don't want to put her on the spot. I don't want to embarrass her. She's going to feel like, oh, now I have to think of something. Actually, Shirley is in one of my videos. She's in 77, so we have collaborated. We've just never sung together. But there's, I don't want to put her on the spot. But yes, I think she's amazingly talented.
Once you put things out in the universe, you never know what can come of it, and that's why we ask that question, because good things can come from ideas like that. So, everyone who watches us knows that it's super important now more than ever to support your artists. And while there are ways to listen to music for free, the truth is that art isn't free. The paintings you have on the wall, I doubt you stole them from a museum. The books that you have on your shelf that should include Alice's, which we didn't even get to, you didn't steal out of a Barnes & Noble. You paid for that art. You should be paying for the art of music as well. Down below, as usual, you will find links to Alice's Bandcamp and places that you can find her music, support her, go to her shows, buy a ticket, buy her music, buy whatever merch she has, support her so that she can keep bringing all of her amazing talent and legacy of music to you. So,
thank you so much, Scott.
We're big believers in that, and it's so important. It's so important, especially, you have to do more, and it's almost like more for less these days in the music business. So, it's super important to us. When you're not making your own music, and I think this is going to be fascinating because you've already broadened into some other genres, and you have a very interesting backstory of the things that you listened to originally when you were growing up. When you're not making your own music and you're just relaxing, maybe you're out on a walk, maybe you're just sitting around and you're like, I want to hear something. Who are a couple of artists that you listen to today that just really kind of you're passionate about, and they give you some fire, and you put them on a little bit of repeat because you're just you just it fills you. It really fills you. Who are a couple that you listen to?
Well, I love the Lindas. I love their songwriting. I think they're really, really good songwriters. They have their albums are not like because they all sing and they all play. They and they all take lead vocal on different songs. They have each song has a little bit of a different flavor, which keeps the albums interesting. And I love their energy live. So I feel very connected to them. I'm very inspired by them. Um, let's see who else. Oh, there's this band in Mexico City that I'm just crazy about. They're called Thorax y las Extremidades. And they are so much fun to listen to and to watch. So I think you can find a few songs on YouTube. I don't know if they have anything, if they've released anything yet, but look for Thorax y las Extremidades. They're really good. I like Sandre in from Spain. And just like, some mainstream songs, I'm really into Ray right now. Really like Ray. Um, and I do try to listen to, there was a time when I would never dream of listening to mainstream music, but I do now. I try and make a point of trying to listen to everything to keep my songwriting muscle more flexible and to give myself a bigger palette to just try and be more open-minded, and not narrow down too much as I get older.
So are you on the path to becoming a Swiftie?
Oh, I don't know. I was I have to say I did listen to that Ophelia song and I thought it was pretty good. And even though I was like, it didn't click right away, later in the day, I was like humming that melody, the chorus melody. And I'm like, where did that come from? What is that? And it's like, oh my God, it's Taylor Swift. So I've gone that mainstream yet, but I do appreciate what she does. And I think also as an artist, I appreciate the way she treats her musicians as someone who knows a lot of musicians. And I've heard that she is very, very thoughtful with her crew, and and that counts for a lot with me, and the way she behaves when she's attacked by the bully in chief. Just, I'm on her side, and she is a little polished for my taste, but she has great ideas too. So yes, I wouldn't consider myself a Swiftie, but I leave room for that. Maybe in the future I will be.
Well, the next time we get together, we're going to update on how far over on the Swiftie meter you have gone, for sure. And Alice, look, we've taken up an hour and 8 minutes, and it feels like 5. And this has been a fantastic conversation with you. I appreciate you making time for us, and absolutely, I want to continue this conversation with your next release. And we can probably dive into some of your other writing and ideas for sure. This has been an honor to have you on and to get to know you. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Scott. And
Absolutely.
I won't hang up because I know you have to do something.
We got to finish this recording, and everyone go out and buy your tickets to Dollfest. Buy Alice's music, but most importantly, now more than ever,
Dollfest and the Sardine on February 13th, if you can go to that. That's in San Pedro, California. I don't know if your listeners are near there.
Well, if you're not, that's a nice place to go visit as well. Make your plans accordingly, but most importantly, please be kind to yourself, love yourself, and do the same to others. We need it more than ever in this world, and it fills your heart and it'll fill the heart of others, and it's together that we get places. So Alice, again, thank you so much for making time, and I look forward to all your success at Dollfest and in your new endeavors. So thanks.
I'll see you in Mexico, Scott.
I'll work on that. I will work on that. Everyone else, we'll see you again on the hang soon. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.